Welcome, everybody, to the Between Two Wheels podcast, Monday edition. How you doing? Well, today, would you rather win the Saxobank E3 Classic or the Gent Wevelgem Classic? We're going to talk about that. Get some feedback from our interview with Drake Deuel. That's been blowing up, at least for me, blowing up here. We will also recap the Volta of Cataluyna. Is Ineos back to their Skyways? We'll take a look at that. Norcal, bike racing on Easter and maybe beyond. Ride of the week, or mailbag, and it appears we're going to get, not going to get that comparison that we typically get on Easter, which is who makes more money, the winner of the Masters or the winner of Paris-Roubaix. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. It looks like we're getting a few people coming in, so we will be looking for your chats and your conversation here with us today. Hope everyone can hear everything okay, and hope everyone had a good weekend. I was able to, hey, look, the weather here in Northern California, it's changing a bit, so I was able to get out and do some riding. Still recovering from my midweek ski jaunt with my friend John Novikov. A little sore. It was about 10 years in between times I've been skiing, but I grew up skiing, so it was fun to get back out there and go with John. And then I'm doing yard work, and I'm really sore, but weather's great, so you can't really complain about anything about that. And then we had a bunch of bike racing last week, a bunch of bike racing over the weekend. So I thought we'd get into that. First of all, it appears to me, and maybe some updates on this, that Paris-Roubaix, since there's all kinds of COVID restrictions in France, Paris-Roubaix is actually being put on hiatus. I first had heard that it was canceled, then I've heard it's been put on hiatus. I think we're just getting and even you saw with the Gent Wevelgem yesterday that they had to change the course a bit. They're not actually deviating into France at all. So that changed that a bit because COVID, it stops right at the border. It knows all those changes. So they weren't able to deviate into France at all, but they were able to race in Belgium. And we do thank the cycling gods for that part, at least. Okay, so start off with the classic things you had. And I bring this up about winning E3. E3 we had, which is Saxobank Classic or whatever you call it. And it took place, I think it was on Thursday or Friday there last week. And we saw some exceptional team tactics. And we'll break that down just a little bit as to what happened there. And then contrast that with those same teams going into Gent Wevelgem, which we saw yesterday, and kind of the comparison there. So when I tuned in on E3, I think Asgreen for Deceuninck Quickstep was up the road. He was in a break. He was looking pretty strong. There was a reduced group already. We had Wout, we had Van der Poel in there. We had Seneschal, we had Oliver Nason, Stebar, Van Mavermaet, Van Barl, bunch of good. Wout obviously was in there. Wout takes a kicker. It's like 20 or so K. I'm trying to just call this out of my mind here. He takes a real hard dig trying to go off the front. And as the group are rejoining that, they're chasing him down, Van der Poel kicks it. And Van der Poel just spits out Wout. Didn't quite have it. And Wout, some people were saying, hey, maybe he was just, kind of dialing it in or, calling it a day due to the fact that he's got Gent Wevelgem coming up. But I don't think that was the case because he was still chasing on pretty hard. So they spit him out. You got Asgreen up front. You got all the Deceuninck Quickstep boys just sitting on, waiting for things to they don't have to chase. They end up bringing Asgreen back into the group, and then that team, Deceuninck, is hitting the front again. Next thing you know, Asgreen, there's a median in the side of the road. He takes a far right turn around it and kicks out there, and they just kind of let him go, and no one chases him. And then he solos off. He'd been off for all day, and then he decided to still just stay off all day. He wins in about 30-second gap there. Seneschal, his teammates who had been able to sit on all day, easily won the field sprint over Mathieu van der Poel, who took it out. It looks like a little bit too far. I don't think he had any teammates in that front group. So behind them, you had Van der Poel in third place, Oliver Nason of AG2R in fourth, Zdeněk Stebar of Deceuninck Quickstep in fifth, Greg Van Avermaet in sixth, Van Barl in seventh for Ineos Grenadiers, Uno X Pro Cycling Team, Marcus Hulgaard and Gianni Vermarsh came in 8th and 9th, about 128, 130 back. He had a little, and then that's when you saw Wout too at 130. Anthony Turgis had been with that group. He and Lampert were chasing. They weren't able to connect. So you had, and just thought it was kind of somewhat interesting that you had the Corny Quick-Step who just dominated in the day. They get first, they get second, they get fifth, so they get three in the top five. They get Lampert in 13th place, Ballerini in 26th, Tim de Klerk in 68th, and then Bert Levenberg got a DNF. So they just stormed the castle on that one, and were not to be put down for their team. And everyone's praising them for how great they rode, and I cannot object to that at all. They they did a great job of putting the team out there and destroying everybody else and doing the right thing, right? Asgreen just continue, and that's when you have a bunch of people on your team that are able to get into those front groups. You're able to play those tactics. You didn't see anybody out there with Manny van der Poel as an example. Who was AG Chura riding for in the finale? That's what Chris Flower wants to know. Chris, that's a great question, because as you look through the result there, you see Van Avermaet, and then you also see Oliver Nason. I would say Nason on that one, Chris, simply because you've got, he's a better sprinter, I would assume. And Van Avermaet, but hey, good question. You get him in 4th and 6th, and it's kind of crazy there. But we obviously know who Duquesne Quick-Step was sprinting for, which was Asgreen's up the road. And by the way, we know Asgreen, he won, Chris and I talked about last week, he won the stage up to Heavenly at the Tour of California. Big guy that climbs. Interesting. Okay. So anyways, it's interesting to see that whole team popping in there and being on the front and doing the right things for the team. You had Wout, you didn't have really other teammates with him. And when you play that game of you're the only guy up there, as you saw with Mathieu van der Poel, you're limited. So you've got someone needed to chase down Asgreen. And I imagine they thought, dude's been off the front for a long time. He's probably the least likely that's going to be able to hold it to the finish, but he's also not the sprinter. So you have Stibar back there. You have, who was in second here? Seneschal, their better sprinter. Those are guys that, so Asgreen was the perfect play, and it played it out. Okay. Fast forward over the weekend. Now we have Gent Wevelgem. You're not able to, I think, did Mads Pedersen win that last year? I believe so. So Trek team tested positive, or someone on the team did, for COVID. So they pull out of the race. I think Bora also pulled out of the race. So you're down 2 strong teams in that race. Well, I tune in, take a look at this thing, you watch the race, and about 90K out, there's already a good split in the front group. You've got about 25, 30 in there. You have Wout, you have his teammate, Nathan Van Hooydonk. Sam Bennett makes the group. Sam Bennett's the only one for Duquesne Quick-Step in that front group. But, you're like, Sam Bennett, if he's able to get over the climbs, that's kind of the guy. But once again, if you don't have a teammate with you, you're more likely going to have to chase down breaks that you might not have had to before, and you just play a little bit different game. Plus, Sam Bennett's not the strongest over these climbs, and he may get, worn down a little bit easier than some of the other riders. We have 54K. There's the Camelberg, Van Hooydonk, and Wout start ripping the break to pieces. Sam Bennett's able to hang in there. Next thing you know, Van Hooydonk gets popped out of the back, and he has to fight back on. You ended up having 2 movie star riders in there, 2 EF education ones. And then the group gets reduced down even more. But basically, I think it was the last time over the Camelberg. That's when you started seeing cracks for Van Hooydonk, because prior to that, you ended up seeing the EF riders get kicked out. There's 2 of them up there, and they ended up finishing 50th and 56th respectively. They were the only 2 that finished for EF education. They got spit out midway. They'd been in that break the whole time, but there are other riders up there in that break. Last time up the Camelberg, that's when Bennett had some trouble. Van Hooydonk did too. They both ended up reconnecting, and that was kind of important. So that you have a break about 40 seconds behind there, the chase group trying to catch up, and you've got Ballerini and a few other Duquesne Quick-Step riders playing some games, kind of breaking up, trying to go back in. But the whole time you had Van Hooydonk really doing it. And then you saw some trouble. It was about 16K to go. Van Hooydonk's on the front for Jumbo, Wout's teammate, and he's going pretty hard, and Wout's on second wheel, and he just sits up. And with that sit up, I think it's forced Stefan Kung to kind of chase into him, and he went really pretty hard. And when they did that move, you ended up seeing Van Poppel get spit out the back, and you saw Bennett get spit out the back. Now, Bennett had been, I don't know if he was throwing up or he was blowing his nose, but it was an ugly sight just a few kilometers before that, where he's sitting on the back. He said he had a hunger knock, and I tend to believe that. You're not going to get rid of Bennett on a flat run-in with guys jumping up. But like I said, when you've got a guy like him that was able to get over these, pitchy climbs, maybe it starts to wear on you a bit, and maybe, he's just, Wevelgem maybe is quite too much little climbing going on with that. Either way, coming to the finish, it's all held together, and Van Hooydonk just lays on the front, and you get a long sprint there by Wout van Aert over Giacomo Nizzolo, Matteo Trentin, Sonny Colbrelli, Michael Matthews, Stefan Kung, Nathan Van Hooydonk. Dylan Van Hooydonk was leading them out, came in just a little bit behind. Dylan Van Barle was the best of the rest of the next group, with Turgis, Johnny Vermaas, Jonathan Leclerc, Greg Van Avermaet in a second. Anyway, so you break down the Deceuninck team from this day. Their top finisher was Yves Lampert and 14th. Then Bert, who was a DNF on E3, he was 20th. Stibar 25th. Murkow 51st. Ballerini at 52nd. Sam Bennett all the way 55. He was letting his team fly past him. And Steen Stills at 83. So that team has a bit of a turnaround from what you saw at E3, obviously. Eric Houston, he was throwing up. They released it. Okay. So that's what we get confirmation that he was throwing up. That's a little bit nasty. But that was after that Kemmelberg, and he was having a little bit of trouble. Just a bit interesting. So I hope they clean that up. They had the quarantine there in Belgium, so I hope that didn't cause a problem with him spewing his innards all over the road. But you can see then from the day before, you had the E3 and the dominance, or the 2 days before of E3, with the dominance of Deceuninck Quick-Step. Contrast that to again Wevelgem and their lack of dominance. Allowing is it a bad tactic letting Bennett get up in that front group? Perhaps they were trying to see if they were chasing that down, but that group went away at 95K to the finish. So did you expect that? Now, if you watch the race, that thing, there was tailwind, which was really helpful for the sprint, and Wout really let it out. I guess Trenton said he didn't have the right gearing for that, or didn't use the right gearing for that. That's on you, buddy. But there was a lot of crosswinds during the day. You kept seeing things break up. And there's one time I'm trying to remember which rider it was. He got guttered, and matter of fact, when Bennett kind of even lost contact there, they were stretching him out, and they were guttering it, with right on the left hand side, and he didn't have much room to try to get a draft, and that's really tough. But I saw another rider, he kind of went off on the road, got guttered, went off on the road just in the grass a little bit. He's trying to catch back up, and you can tell in his mindset, he's just like, oh, just kick it down here a few gears, and I'm going to boom, be right back there. It took him about a minute and this is just some part during the race. It took him about a minute to try to catch up for that group, simply because he was so guttered. And it's just a difference when you're off the back and you start to get the effects of the wind. Anyway, interesting there. Deceuninck Quick-Step, once again, they had the chance. They didn't quite pull it together, but you saw a thing, which is Van Hooydonk rode a great race for Wout. Wout gets the win. All praise should be going to Van Hooydonk for being able to basically stretch that thing out in the last kilometer. That's real important, so that other riders aren't attacking and he's having to do whatever. Wout could just wind up for that. Something had happened to him. He had a teammate there. All these things that happened to Bennett. your whole basket of win is in it, or your chances are in this one basket, and then he throws himself up. Next thing you know, your best finish there is 14th place. But it was a pretty good race. The women's getting Wevelgem. I started watching that this morning, and I'm like, I read the reports and I'm watching it. I'm like, this is totally not what. And then I realized I was watching Omloop, a replay of. So I finally went back and watched it. 37K to go. You get a big split in the group. Longo Borghini, Trek rider, kicks it, starts to split things up. You have Voss, you have Kopecky, Van Dijk, Amy Peters, Marta Cavelli in there, a bunch of Trek riders. Then Jumbo's Anna Henderson starts going off the front. She's got like 30 second gap. That's between the 27 or the 37 and like 20 to go. But at 20 to go, Trek blasted the front. They started spreading things out, guttering it. And you're seeing Ruth Widner up there. All these, I think she's the one that's wearing the American flag right now. Longo Borghini then attacks out of that. You have this other girl, Paladin, that's with her. Doesn't do a lot of work, but so from 20K all the way in, actually till about 300 meters to go. You've got these two out there. They had a decent gap, just keep coming down. And even when they're getting caught right before 300 meters to go, Longo Borghini is still then trying to almost lead her team out by sprinting. But man, Marianne Vos hits the front at 300 to go, tailwind, and holds the sprint all the way to the line. It was pretty impressive. No one comes around her. Nicely done with a post up there. Marianne Vos for Jumbo Visma in first place. Lotte Kopecky, Liv in second. Lisa Brennauer in third. Elisa Balsama, Marta Bastali, Emily Farland, and then you had two Americans in the top 10. Kristen Faulkner of Team Tibco SVB, Sarah Roy of Team Bike Exchange in 8th. 9th is Emma Newsgard, and then the other American, Lauren Stevens, for Team Timco SVB. So, yeah, those two Tibco riders in the top 10, same time, just didn't have the sprint to compete with everyone else. Okay, great. Now let's take a turn back in time and go to the Volta. Volta Cataluyna, that finished as well on Sunday, but it really finished earlier in the week. And then it was just going to be a little more of a procession and an interesting race the last few days to kind of see if we got a Sagan win and see if Alejandro Valverde, I think it was his last year, if he can actually get on the podium. I think he raced this race back when they actually had the Barcelona Olympics back in 92. I'm not sure if he actually did, but because I don't think it came to the fore until 2000 something. But anyway, it was a fairly interesting race, and it was pretty much dominated by Ineos. And with that domination, it raises some questions. Hey, are they back to their old Skyways? Well, hang on a little bit. The other teams weren't quite as well represented. You had, as an example, Sepp Kuss for Jumbo. Jumbo's kind of the big other team right now on the GC front. And he had Steven Kruijswijk there to help him. Okay, but you didn't have like Vingegaard there. You didn't have Roglic there. You didn't have Wout there. And with that, though, you had a pretty stacked team as far as Ineos goes. Carapaz, Geraint Thomas, Adam Yates. You didn't have Bernal, but you have Richie Porte. So it was Rowan Dennis. I mean, it was pretty solid. Matter of fact, stage one goes. It's got some lumps in it in the first section there, and maybe we'll bring up the actual results here. We could take a look and share those on the screen for everybody. But in the break ended up staying away. And with the break staying away, you ended up getting Andres Kron of Lotto Soudal gets a win over Luis Leon Sanchez, Remy Roches, and Leonard Kamna was up in that grade. Now, Leonard Kamna featured pretty prominently here for this race. So we will at least get to see. I think, look, he had a stage win. Was it in the Tour last year? I don't know. It was one of the Grand Tours. And long range breakaway guy can climb really well. So for that part, it was actually somewhat impressive. So this Kron guy, Andres Kron, he only gets a day though in the yellow jersey, or that's not a yellow jersey. It's actually a jersey that's kind of white with some striping on it. So Andres Kron, here's your thing. And so, here's the GC you had, same as the stage race. But stage 2 is going to happen. And with that, he is, a little more subjected to a time trial here. And with the time trial, you ended up seeing a ton of Ineos riders, and this is why they ended up dominating things out. But it's still, there's little things to play into it here. Rohan Dennis destroys over Remy Cavagna, Yao Almeida, Brendan McNulty, Steven Kruijswijk, Richie Porte, Adam Yates, Joe Cerny, and Debod, and then Geraint Thomas. So, TJ, did you know TJ was still riding? He plops into the top 15 there with a decent time, but you didn't really hear anything else from him thereafter. Now, Rohan Dennis, day before, he lost 2 minutes, 2:16 actually. So there's some criticism of him. I know Chris Horner had said some things about like, look, why you're going to probably win this time trial the next day. Why are you losing 2 minutes on that day? You could at least have the jersey, kind of support the team. Well, I get that. However, you saw what Rohan Dennis did then thereafter a few days where he's like on the front for like 30 kilometers, just killing it. I think he knew his role. He wasn't really worried about having a leader's jersey, and they were expecting some of the other teammates. I mean, this actually, you look at the top 10 here, it actually is reminiscent of, you'd think that maybe this was a team time trial results. I mean, it's got Ineos, Deceuninck, then you have a UAE and a Jumbo, and then an Ineos, then a Deceuninck, then an Astana, and then an Ineos, then a Deceuninck. So, I mean, between Deceuninck and Ineos, you just packed the top 10, top 11 actually with riders. Pretty impressive. Ron Dennis gets the overall. Well, he didn't actually get the leader jersey. You had João Almeida, Brendan McNulty, Luis Leon Sanchez, Stephen Koizwick, who put in a really good time. So did Richie Porte, Adam Yates. So when you see Adam Yates, like a climber like that, being able to put in pretty solid time trial, you start to go, oh, maybe there's a little something to be thought of here and to be looking forward to. The next day was a really good stage up to the top of, it was 203 kilometers, Canal Olympic de Cataluyna to Volta 2000. Okay. This one, Adam Yates ends up winning. He takes off pretty good. He was up there with Alejandro Valverde. You have Sepp Kuss with him. They're all looking fairly good. And then Sepp starts to do his thing where he attacks, I don't know, 2 or 3, I think, K to the finish. Easily brought back by Yates and countered where he just goes drop. So they had already got rid of Valverde. He was not able to hold, but in the end, you didn't end up seeing Sepp Kuss do all that great. He ends up dropping down to 6th place. He had a few other people ended up clawing their way past him. Alejandro Valverde, Esteban Chavez had been chasing up there. Looked really good, kind of reminiscent of days maybe back in 2017, 16. 17? Is that the Giro where he was looking pretty good until he wasn't? I think so. Geraint Thomas. This is also what's impressive about Ineos here. Although they have their riders, Geraint Thomas, Richie Porte doing a lot of team pulling for Adam Yates here. These guys still push themselves to the finish, which inevitably led them to kind of occupy the top. So you had GC on the day, Adam Yates, Richie Porte, João Almeida. Now, I'll say about João Almeida, that guy, it seems like he always gets himself into a lead quickly. Always. I mean, this just starts from the Volta last year. And then you just see him suffering like a dog, holding as much as he can, trying to help positions, just losing a little bit here and there. So I never really get to see him like really riding to, where he's like pushing it out. It always seems like he's somehow falls into a lead and then he's defending it, and he does really well. I'll be interested to see kind of how he does coming forward in the next few years. At least, it's kind of interesting to get thrust the leadership on you, and then kind of just how that works from you, as compared to Sepp Kuss, who we're expecting a lot of, and he hasn't really been able to kind of exceed there. You get a race like this, you go, oh, Sepp Kuss is one of the best climbers in the world. He's going to be able to do great. And then you get him and put into a position where he is the leader, and you're not quite sure how things are going. Now, great. Granted as well, he peaks for specific races, and that's where he's at his best. So then you see a smaller race like this, and you're expecting him to just destroy everybody. But maybe he's a little tired from all the work he's done previously. Maybe he's not peaking. So whereas you're getting someone else possibly peaking for a race like this, and then it just, shakes up itself a little bit differently. Stage 4, kind of not a repeat of the day before. Well, kind of, where Chavez decides to take it a little bit more. He tacks him a long ways out. He ends up holding everybody. And Team Ineos just does, as I think Sepp called it, like a sprint. It was like an 18-kilometer climb up to the finish. And to Port Ain, 166.5 kilometers that day. And Esteban Chavez gets the win. Mike Woods come in second, 7 seconds behind. They clawed that back from about 30 seconds. Geraint Thomas, Adam Yates, Sepp Kuss, Alejandro Valverde, Richie Porte, Wilco Kelderman, Nairo Quintana, your usuals, Simon Yates and Hugh Carthy just dropped a little bit at the top there with João Almeida. Once again, losing 25 seconds. Once again, that's just how he does it. He holds on, he fights, and then just loses a little bit here and there as we go. So the GC is on that day, after 4, Adam Yates, Richie Porte, Geraint Thomas, top 3 there with Ineos. And as I described, they kind of, those all, especially 2 and 3 there, they just did their best to do a lot of work. You saw, especially this stage, you saw leading up into the climb, and about halfway or more than that up it was a lot of work being done by Rowan Dennis. You had Carapaz also in there doing a ton of work as well, until, just didn't need to. And then Geraint Thomas actually pulls him into the finish, and he ends up, being right there with the front group. Pretty impressive for how that whole team is riding this. But once again, it's a little bit of a strip down from other teams, not quite the same. So it's impressive. It's impressive to see how they're riding and to see those guys. But, I don't know that I'd lay too much into it. Next day, Leonard Kamna finally gets his win. He'd been 4th on the stage 1, and it's top 4. gets a win. Ruben Guerrero of EF comes in second. Mikhail Barzarka, Biz Cara of Euskaltel comes in third, and Dion Smith. Now, by the way, you had Raleigh racing out there, U.S. team. Was kind of hoping that you would see a little bit from them, but we didn't really see much at all. There was some Colin Joyce, sprinting days. You kind of hope that he's going to get something, and it didn't quite work out for that. GC didn't really change. Going into stage 6. Stage 6 was at least a day that we were like, okay, should be a sprinter's day. They changed the book from one day to the next. First it said a Cat 1 climb, and then when it actually came out and you started watching the race, it was a Cat 3. So you're like, yeah, should get over the top. Peter Sagan should get over the top, and you ended up seeing him doing what he almost had the little replay though of what you saw him get kicked out of the Tour for. We'll talk about that kind of sprinting here in a little bit. We saw a little bit of Ford, but he ended up not. The gap didn't close down like it did with Wout, pushing him into the barriers, and he pushed back. So he would end up being clear there, and it worked out for him as well. Peter Sagan finally gets his win. First place over Daryl Impey, who was trying to come on there, and over Juan Sebastian Milana, Van Rensburg, and Camp. And did you see, and McNulty ends up in 12th there. I was trying to see if, there we go, Colin Joyce, 27th. So you didn't really quite get what you expected from some of the American riders in the Cataluyna, at least as far as the rally racing goes. Last day, this was short a little, about 137 or so kilometers, racing in around Barcelona. And then they came in, they did 6 circuits, I think, around there with a little pitch. There's a break off the front. They 4 minutes when they come into that circuit rate, and there's some decent riders in there. Dan Martin's in that front group, but they ended up letting the group 2 guys go off the front, which was DeKent and Mohoric. Mohoric, every time they came, they have this steep descent, he gets in the super tuck and he's gone, and then DeKent has to catch up. So you're thinking, oh, last time up the climb there, if Mohoric gets it, because they go up the climb, they come down, and then they have a little bit of a flat. They go through the start finish, then they go back up the climb. So there's some break there, and you think, oh, maybe Mohoric's going to gain that time down the bottom, and he's going to maybe be able to solo away. But no, last time up, DeKent ended up spitting him out, and then he does the super tuck and gets away and ends up getting the win over Mohoric. In the end, you saw a little bit, not much of a breakup, but I did see that Sepp Kuss actually lost time because the GC riders were kind of all together there. But he ended up slipping from 9th down to 12th overall, minute 50. So I'm not sure what happened. I don't know if he had a mechanical. You wouldn't expect him to, lose any time really on a stage like that, but evidently he did. So Cataluyna, what did you learn from there? One, Sepp Kuss needs to time trial a little better. That would help him. We also learned that Ineos, when they want to, they can ride pretty well. And I think this is kind of a tune-up race for them. Like, hey, let's really work on our domestique stuff here. Adam Yates went to the lead, and he did a real impressive climb, by the way, on stage 3, being able to just dispatch everybody, especially when Sepp Kuss and Alejandro Valverde were riding pretty strong. We saw that Chris Froome still has some trouble climbing. Mike Woods is looking pretty good and bouncing back from his broken leg or whatever, femur. We've already seen him do well. Mark Hirschi starting to come around a little bit. At least he had a top 7th place there. I think he got in the break on the last day. What else did we see? Well, like I said, I think Ineos is kind of doing their, hey, let's, some of the riders are coming into form. You get Tom G is coming into, Geraint Thomas, Richie Porte is looking good, top 3 last year in the Tour de France. Carapaz doing a little bit of work. I don't know. Looking pretty good to me. I think Sepp Kuss still needs to work a little bit on his team stuff as far as being a leader, and see where that leads us. Okay, so we have Norcal. Norcal has some racing coming up here. Chowchilla Crit is coming up on April 3rd. I think you could still apply for that, and apply being the optimum word of register. So you can still register for that race or that ride, I believe, and the race, and get a chance to do something. I think they're going to have some people coming in on board, so that you might want to go check out the pro race. And because I don't know if Legion is going to be there, but there keeps being hints that it's going to be fantastic. And so I don't know who all there, but we have some other news here, which is Velopromo has indicated that they are going to start doing some racing. So I'll just read their Velopromo plans for reopening. No one wants to return to racing more than Velopromo. Okay. We are currently discussing events in the next few months with the applicable cities and counties, and we are currently proposing the following state and local COVID-19 guidance and increased vaccinations. May 9, early birds in Fremont. May 16, early birds in Fremont. These are kind of late birds. When you really call it late birds. May 30, Regalado Road Race in Oakdale. June 5, Copperopolis Road Race in Milton. Where else? July 3rd, Leesville Gap Road Race in Williams. July 17, Watsonville Crit in Watsonville. July 18, early birds in Fremont. And I believe they also had a little bit, let me see if they have a little bit more to this statement here. Yeah, so I'll keep reading this along. Once they let us know that they'll allow, we'll apply for a USAC permits. It's possible that some of these will not. Can't see what that'd be through Merced County, for example, is still not even accepting any application. These events are reasonably low cost, even with higher expenses relating to COVID-19 mitigations, reduced fields limits. We'd like to schedule Katua Creek somewhere in here as well, and a 4th early bird date. Other events later in the 2021 season are like Patterson, Dunnigan, Winners, Giro, Oakland may need your help through sponsorship to some companies, clubs, and communities. Any ideas? Due to the higher cost, CHP officials and permits, staff surcharges, etc. Maybe no t-shirts. There you go. We are still deep in debt through Mary Maroon's GoFundMe effort has helped us through this difficult past year, and the situation is improving. Thanks, Mary, and all the donors. We'll be back in full swing 2022. Meanwhile, most of our event plans for this year are still going forward, including the Cow Cup races, those above, and others as usual. Robert Liebold, Velopromo Cycling. All right, well, that's actually some good news. I'm glad to see them looking to get us back on the board as far as races go. And for the most part, you know, none of that's there blamed me for the reasons of not having racing going on, because I think that's what they did last time. How about we go? I just want to make some comments. So a Drake Deuel interview we had, episode 226, went really well. And with that, I don't know, that's someone else posted some things online. The views have been really up. It's like about 1,300. I thought we'd do a little bit of read some of the mailbag from that. You can find that on our YouTube channel and check us out. Now, by the way, we got a bunch of new subscribers. Appreciate that as well. We'll try to keep interviews coming. Otherwise, we do race updates. A few other videos. We try to do some racing videos we post on YouTube as well. You know, some of the riders that do that. And so we also try to, before was showing video of racing, pro racing, and then talking about it. But due to the copyright strikes that we've got in there, we've decided to cut that out. Okay. I don't know if we're going to just see this. So RK Media says it seems rowing is a super good base for being a good bike rider. Just look at Jason. I'm not sure who Jason is, but it is. Tim said this is an awesome podcast. I just happened to stumble on it. I live in Gold River. Okay, that's where I broadcast from. I don't know who you are, Tyler. Well, welcome to the club. But you did a great job in this interview. I appreciate that. I watched Drake on YouTube climb Haleakala. He is amazing. I lived in Hawaii for 20 years, never cycled Haleakala, but I ran up it, run to sun. Jesus, that sounds horrible. It's an epic climb, no matter how you get up. I'll be following on Strava. Drake, you're a humble young man. Maybe chasing KOMs is to do, of course, in any age group, any group my age. Keep up the work, Tyler. We'll be watching. Yeah, so got good comments here about Drake and his positivity. And Brian Zimney wants to know, because we'll take your comments when we get these. Why Copperopolis but no Snelling? Snelling. Maybe it has to do with, I don't know, Brian. Maybe it has something to do with the area out there. Well, I think Velopromo puts on that race as well. So I don't know. Maybe make an inquiry. And by the way, thanks, Brian, for the update on this Velopromo stuff. You sent that to me. If they're deep in debt, should be sure run. Yeah. So if they're in debt, Snelling, it seems like that might be one, because that always seems to sell out. It's a good race to kind of maybe make some money on. I don't know. Maybe it's more expensive actually putting on that race. I doubt it. Young killer with his head on straight. Okay. Tour breakaway. Man, all these rowers are taking over the sport. First, it was the Zwift World Title. Now Drake is taking all the KOMs. Little did we know the Pro Peloton was already infiltrated by what we thought was a tri guy, but it's apparently a rower. Cameron Worth. What's next? A rower wins a Grand Tour. I hope not. Or a ski jumper. We've already got one of those. So rowing is the hardest sport. I'm a decent cyclist and grateful I got into rowing first. I need to borrow a rowing machine, but they're so pricey. Yeah. I don't know much about rowing other than, how you do it. East Mary Loop is legit and there's gravel. That's what Huntington says. Okay. So let's get back to, so we're getting some comments here. We already saw that. Eric Houston says Snelling is too flat. Well, yeah. Okay. Sean Bagley, Merced County is being stubborn about racing. That's why Turlock is on hold. The race had to cross into Merced County. Okay. Because it's probably like what we just saw with Wevelgem. And thanks, Sean, for that. Probably what we saw with Gent Wevelgem, where as soon as you cross into France, COVID is totally different aspect there. So you got to watch those things. I'm being an asshole. I know. What else do we have here? Ride of the week. My ride of the week. And please make your comments still. We'll talk about Norcal. I think we'll try to do a Friday show this week, previewing, going over the race in Chowchilla. Maybe we'll get a gaggle of people to actually join in on the live stream, and I'll be looking out there for some of you to be insane commentators with me. We'll just do a live thing and go over the racing and talk about who's been registered, and we can do that. Okay, so ride of the week. Ride of the week is going to Nacer Bouhanni. Okay, this is one I just want to talk about here. I did get this text from Chris. Kaylee Fretz getting some heat for calling Bouhanni a terror. He retired his article and now calls him a nightmare. So cycling tip, and I didn't read that one. Well, I do have the nightmare one here. And I wonder if, look, Nacer Bouhanni, and I'm going to try to show this clip actually of him doing the race. So it was a race that Viviani ended up winning over the weekend. And with that, there was in the sprint, Nacer Bouhanni had a little bit of an issue, okay? Kind of the Groenewegen type of thing, but without all the tragicness that came from the wreck that he had there in the Tour of Poland. Okay, look, so part of this problem is if this is just a sprinter crossing the lines, and we'll show the sprint here, if it's just him kind of pushing and bumping as we have, it's not that, it's a big deal after the Groenewegen issue, but is it really a big thing? Well, the problem is Bouhanni. Bouhanni is kind of the Ron Artest of cycling world. I don't know if you remember Ron Artest. So he had a fight in the stands, Pacers Pistons thing back in 04, I think it was. Went into the stands, was punching people, and he was a little bit, not just that, but he had a reputation, right, of just that kind of guy. Remember, I wrote this down here. Meta Sandiford Artest, that's his name now. He was born Ronald William Artest. As an American former professional basketball player, he was known as Ron Artest before legally changing his name to Meta World Peace, okay, in 2011, and later to Meta Sandiford Artest in May 2020. Anyway, Bouhanni has a long list of problems, including a violent altercation with his own director, physical fight with Rudy Barbieri, another sprinter. He's punched, he broke his wrist, I think, or really hurt it before a race, like punching the wall. He's got problems. He claims he's a boxer, and he's just a little bit of a hothead. And when you see him sprinting, you end up kind of encountering those things. So maybe we'll take a look at the actual sprint that you had here. And with that, I'm going to pull it up on Twitter, and we'll get it loaded here and actually see if we can find the sprint and see if you can see this. Why are we not seeing that in bigger form? There we go. Okay. We'll go full screen, Nacer Bouhanni, and this will keep repeating itself over and over. So you can see him there in red. He leans into Jake Stewart, I think his name is, and then, closes the door, and then leans into him. That guy rubs the barriers quite nicely. See, this is a little bit of barriers. This is how they should have had him in Turkey. I think it would have been better off. So is this an egregious move? Not so much, but when he leans into him, perhaps a little bit on that case. Okay, so Bouhanni basically is saying in his response there, that he, look, I was trying to take this wheel, didn't mean anything to Jake, Jake Stewart, though, says, yo, Bouhanni, I would ask if what you were thinking, but you clearly have no brain cells. The ironic thing is, you told me I had no respect after the finish. Here's an educational video of what no respect looks like. So Jake Stewart kind of came back in that. Sean Bagley, let's take a look at what he said. Check out the new barriers. Pretty much kept him upright. Totally agree. Kept him in there kind of like a pinball machine. So he was able to do that. And those are the kind of barriers that we should be looking at. Those are the kind of things the UCI should be spending their money and their efforts on. So was this an egregious move by the sprinter? I mean, if you're looking at this and it's not Bahani, the answer would be, okay, he came in and then when he felt that he had contact, he was worried about himself. So he kind of leaned in and did that. The problem is you've got Bahani who makes a name for himself of being kind of a crappy, he'll do all kinds of, he had off-field, so to say, incidents, with his violent altercation with the manager, some punching another sprinter. He's had these things. So you go, okay, that doesn't really relate to on the bike. But I think that I've seen him racing and he takes gaps, he takes moves. He does all kinds of things where I think you're stretching into the realm of kind of dirty. So with that, you kind of do. Look, so they referred this issue out to the UCI. They're going to take a look and see if there's any kind of conduct that they need to have an issue with. Jake Stewart accused his Frenchman of having no brain cells. Yeah, we just read that part. Bahani, as we saw, deviated from his line. And let's see if there's any comments here from Buhani. I don't see it in here, but as we saw last year with Groenewegen, they hand down this big strict penalty. So I imagine you're going to see something like that with Buhani. Simply, once again, because of the fact of who he is, he doesn't get much grace in this section. So I don't know. That's what we have. I think Bahani is probably he should get relegated. Should he get kicked off of the tour for a few months? I don't know. Do I feel bad for him? I don't know. Maybe a little bit. It didn't seem overly over the top with that, but you put a guy in the barrier and that's not going to happen. Luckily, the barriers kept him upright. Otherwise, you probably would have been looking at the same exact situation. Dude flying through the barriers, 40 miles an hour or whatever they're doing there at the finish, and it would have been ugly to see. Last comment we'll take here, Eric Houston. He goes left and repeatedly goes left. If you just gone forward, a little bit elbow, finish tire, possibly. But then again, he's Buhani. And with Buhani, we can't ever really know what he's thinking because as Jake Stewart said, he's lacking brain cells. Anyway, that's 229 episodes Between Two Wheels podcast. Thanks everyone for joining in. Look for us next week as we try to do a show about Chowchilla. We'll try to get up there, do that live for everybody. Thanks for all the new listeners and viewers. Be well, my friends. Stay upright and don't Buhani anybody. All right. Take care.